Parkinson will hold at just past the 35-yard line. Pete Gogolaki's had problems. He's 1 for 6 this year. And it's good. From the 36-yard line, Pete Gogolak hits. And with timeout, the score is the Giants 3, the Cowboys 3.
Well, hello. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to check out this video, and welcome to the Gridiron. And before I get started, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone out there who's watched any of my videos, maybe subscribe to my channel, maybe give my video a thumbs up, or maybe left a comment, or anything at all you can do to help my channel out. I greatly appreciate it. I'm just trying to get my channel up and running, and anything you guys can do to help my channel out, I greatly appreciate it. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right, so 1932, another season full of controversy. I could go on with this one for about probably about 3 hours. I'm going to try to keep it to about 15 minutes. But there was controversy after the 1925 season, controversy after the 1931 season, controversy after this 1932 season. It's crazy, crazy times in football. But anyway, 1932 was the 8th season in the history of the New York Football Giants. It was the 13th season in the history of the NFL. Due to the Depression, all right, there was only 8 teams in the NFL in 1932 compared to 10 teams in 1931. The 8 teams that consisted of the NFL in 1932 were the Boston Braves, who are now the Washington Football Team. The Brooklyn Dodgers, who way indirectly, okay, are now the Indianapolis Colts. The Chicago Bears, the Chicago Cardinals, the Green Bay Packers, the New York Giants, the Portsmouth Spartans, who are now the Detroit Lions, okay, and the Staten Island Stapletons. That's the 8th team, and sadly, this would be the Staten Island Stapletons last season. Now, the Giants wasn't such a good year for them. They wound up in 5th place with a record of 4-6-2. All the teams that year played anywhere between 10 and 14 games. There was once again, no set schedule. But at least this is one of the few seasons that the teams played a same amount of games, shall we say. Years in the past, there were teams that played like 5 or 6 games, and another, like the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, would play like 19 games. All the teams this year played between 10 and 14 games. The Giants, they struggled mightily offensively. They scored a grand total of 14 touchdowns. They played 12 games. Okay, so the 14 touchdowns. One was a punt return. One was a fumble recovery, from back for a touchdown. So basically, their offense scored 12 touchdowns in 12 games. Not going to get the job done. The defense gave up 17 touchdowns. They scored only 93 points all season, and they gave up 113. And the Giants pretty much right out of the gate, they just kind of shot themselves in the foot. I mean, they started off 1-5-1, and they were out of it. They lost their first 3 games. Then they won 1. They tied 1. Then they lost their next 2, and they were 1-5, and the season was over with. But they finished up, kind of nicely in a little bit of strong suits. So, after they started 1-5-1, they won 3 of the next 4, but they wound up finishing 4-6-2 and in 5th place. And it's 5th place out of 8 teams, so they were in the bottom half of the league, which is the first time that they finished in the bottom half of the league. They struggled mighty on offense, and they were shut out 5 times. Now, just to go to show you how badly on offense they were. 1929, they scored 312 points. All right, they wound up in 2nd place out of 12 teams. 1930, they scored 308 points, and they were in 2nd place out of 11 teams. 1931, they scored 154 points, and they wound up in 5th place out of 10 teams. And this year, they only scored 93 points, and they wound up in 5th place out of 8 teams. So their offense was hurting. One of the big reasons why was they had Benny Friedman on their team from 1929 to 1931. Now, he from 27 28, 29, and 30. Those 4 seasons, he led the league in passing yards, passing touchdowns, and whatever team he was on, their offense led the league in scoring. So he was not on their team anymore. He was on the Brooklyn Dodgers. All right, and he was kind of getting a little up there in age too, and he just wasn't the same. I mean, just, guys back then didn't play 17, 18 seasons. I mean, it was rough and tough. You played offense, you played defense. Guys didn't last very long back then. I mean, if you had a bad knee injury or something, that pretty much ended your career. It's not like it is today. Today the guys get a knee injury, they're making $1 million, $2, $3, $4, $5, $10 million a year. They can afford to take the time off. They don't have to work a job. They just made $10 million. They got money in the bank, so they can just spend their whole day rehabbing their injury. Here you get an injury, you might get operated on, maybe you do, maybe you don't, whatever, but you have to work to support your family, so you can't start, it's going to take the next couple of years off and rehab my knee. No, that didn't happen back then, so guys didn't last very long. Now, that's pretty much it for the Giants. The season itself was just kind of crazy, so I'm not going to go way overboard on the season here. I'll just try to narrow it down, toward the finish line here. The season pretty much was between 3-team race, between the Green Bay Packers, the Chicago Bears, and the Portsmouth Spartans, who in 1934 became the Detroit Lions. I'm not gonna keep saying Portsmouth. I have a hard time saying it. I'm just gonna say Spartans from here on in. Right? The Packers had had everything in their own hands. All right, they started off 8-0-1. Then they finished the season, the last 5 games of the season, they were 2-3. So they finished 10-3-1. They lost the last 2 games of the season. They lost to the Spartans 19-0, and they lost to the Bears 9-0. In going into the last 2 weeks of the season, all 3 of those teams could have won the championship. The Packers with 2 games left. If they won their last 2 games, right, the Spartans and the Bears both would have had 2 losses. The Packers would have only had 1 loss, and therefore the Packers would have won the championship. That didn't happen. If the Packers would have won the last game of the season against the Bears, the Spartans would have won the championship. That didn't happen. It wound up where the Bears won the championship, and I'll go over that in just a minute here. So the way it wound up working out, hopefully you can see this here. This is the way it wound up working out. All right. At the end of the season, all right, the Bears were 6-1-6. The Spartans were 6-1-4, and the Packers were 10-3-1. The Bears, because ties did not count in the standings, they both wound up with an 857 winning percentage. They were tied for first. All right. Had ties counted like they do after the 1972 season in the NFL, all right, the Packers would have won, because the Packers had a 750 winning percentage. If the ties counted, because ties counts half a win, half a loss, all right. The Spartans would have been in second place with 727 winning percentage, and the Bears would have been in third with a 692 winning percentage. But the ties didn't count. So, this is what we wound up having. We had a tie for first between the Spartans and the Bears. They were both technically 6-1. Now, the tiebreakers, didn't matter, because the Spartans and the Bears played each other 2 times. Okay, they tied each other twice, 13-13 and 7-7. So it wasn't like, well, the Bears beat the Spartans twice, so the Bears are the better team. No, both teams tied. Okay. So they were going to wind up playing a title game, all right, to decide who the champion would be. And starting with the 1933 season, there was a specific, the game. There was always a championship game from 1933 on, and what we know now as the Super Bowl. All right, but starting 1933, they came up with 2 divisions, and the 2 teams that won each division played for the championship game. All right, but 1932, there was only 1 division, 8 teams. Spartans and the Bears were tied. All right, both at 6-1. So they wound up coming up to find out who was going to be the winner. All right, you wound up playing a title game. Now, the title game was supposed to be in Chicago, Wrigley Field, the home of the Bears. All right, but due to severe blizzards and extreme cold and wind chill factor, the game was moved indoors to the Chicago Stadium. All right, this is where it gets cute. The field was only 80 yards long, okay, and it was 60 yards between each goalpost. All right, so you got 10 yards in the end zone, 10 yards in the other. There's only 60 yards of playing field. The field was only 45 yards wide. Back then, the field was 55 yards wide. I mean, now it's 50, but back then it was 55, so it was 45, so it was 10 yards narrower than it was back then. The goalposts were on the end line, but they brought the goalposts to the goal line for this championship game. And when a team crossed the 10-yard line, all right, because the field was, they moved the ball back. So say the team got down to like the other team's 9-yard line, they moved the ball back 20 yards to accommodate for the shorter field. So now once you got to the 9, just say, well, then they brought the ball back to the 29, right? To accommodate for the shorter field. And because of the smaller field, there were no drop kicks or field goals allowed. All right, so it made for a very, very interesting game. The game was on December 18th, 1932, at the Chicago Stadium, all right, in front of 11,198 fans. It was just rather, I don't want to say comical, but it was rather different. The week before that, apparently there was a Salvation Army sponsored circus in there, and some of the elephants in there, they did their business, and apparently some of the manure left a big stench inside the stadium, and supposedly one of the Chicago Bears players was thrown up on the field due to the stench. There was a lot, kind of comical, with the size of the field and all that and everything. The Bears quarterback, John Dolings, okay, his first pass went into the stands. Because the stands were like right on the field. It was just so small and tight. I've seen a picture of the stadium before, and I saw a picture of you can look it up online. It's a small stadium. It's a small field. Most of the punts and the kickoffs went out of bounds as well. One of the balls that was kicked collided with the Chicago Blackhawks sign, and another ball hit the organist as he was playing. The ball went out of bounds, into the stands, and wound up hitting the organist. The Spartans came very close to scoring a touchdown, okay, but their one player, Glenn Parsons, tripped before he reached the end zone, or the Spartans actually would have scored a touchdown. There was no scoring in the game until the fourth quarter. Now, the first touchdown was scored, and the only touchdown was scored was a Bronco Nagurski 2-yard pass to Red Grange. Those are two historic players, Bronco Nagurski and Red Grange. That put the Bears up 7-0. Okay. However, the Spartans, the rules were back then that to throw a pass, you had to be at least 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Nowadays, that's not the case. And shortly after, I believe it was the next season, the rule changed that you could throw, as long as you were behind the line of scrimmage like it is today, you could throw a forward pass. But I said back then, you had to be at least 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage to throw a pass. Well, the Spartans were complaining that Nagurski was not 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Was he or wasn't he? Who knows? The refs said that he was at least 5 yards, and the touchdown stood to make the Bears go up 7-0. The only other scoring in the game was a safety when the Spartans fumbled the ball out of their own end zone and gave the Bears a 9-0 lead, and they wound up winning 9-0. And therefore, the Bears wound up winning the championship. All right, and I'll just throw this up here. Okay, they were 7-1-6. All right, They had an 875 winning percentage. The Packers were 10-3-1. They had a 769 winning percentage. And the Spartans were like tied for first. So after their loss here, they wound up falling in third place. So they wound up with a 6-2-4 record. It's 7-50. What an absolutely crazy season. But as I said, starting the following season, 1933, all right, the NFL split into two divisions, and whoever won the division wound up playing for the championship, as I said. And the championship is, as we know today, is the Super Bowl. And the Giants weren't very significant in the 1931 or 1932 season, but starting in 1933, the New York Football Giants started becoming very significant, especially when it comes to championships. Well, as always, guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to check out this video. You guys stay safe out there, and go Giants! Woo!